How's it going, guys? So you may hear my ceiling fan, so I do apologize about that. Still trying to, keep the room nice and cold. And you may even hear some rain in the background. We've been having a lot of thunderstorms and stuff like that too. Of course, usually if that's the case, I'll put in some form of like ambient background music or something like that. So we're here for Let's Talk About Rust. Last video I did was about tameable animals. Now I think we're going to be on the list of animals that should actually be in Rust when they start doing, if they ever do, animal updates. The first one is the penguin. Health, about 100. Damage, 5 to 10 damage. You harvest them for food. Animal hide makes waterproof suit. Can only be found in the Arctic biome. Now, the very little information I know about penguins is they're not really that big of fighters. I mean, you look at something like emperor penguins, they stand, maybe 4 feet tall, good maybe 80 pounds. But you don't really see them going to be like charging after people like an ostrich or emu would. They don't really seem like that big of fighters. I mean, if you get hit by one of their bills or their beaks or whatever you want to call it, I think it would, if they stab you with that, it would hurt. But I don't really see them as too much of a threat to the point where they would actually attack people. So I think they would be a pretty good food source in Rust for that reason. Very minimal damage. Like I said, you can harvest them for food and stuff like that. Get your animal hide, animal fat, stuff like that. Now, when I said for the animal hide makes waterproof suit, you can find scuba diver suits throughout the game. However, they are still kind of rare to find because you usually only find them in the brown crates that you would find on the sides of the roads, or you could even buy them even at Fishing Village. But if you don't have the scrap for it, or if you're playing on a bigger server, it may actually make things a little more difficult. And these animals will be strictly based on the biome that's in Rust. Is basically also in real life, so you will find penguins in cold areas like Antarctica and I believe the South Pole, but more like glacial areas and stuff like that. So it only makes sense that they'd be more of a kind of a docile enemy. I mean, kind of like chickens are in the game. Chickens can still attack you, but they do very little damage. So I think penguins would be right around that area. But I have a list of animals we're going to go through, so this is just the first one, and usually you may hear some cars go by too in the background, so I do apologize about that too. Let's get to the next animal. That following next animal is the camel. Now, camels I've only ever seen be in the desert, or desert savanna type of areas. Usually you find them in the Middle Eastern area. You may find some camels even in areas like of Africa and stuff like that. Hell, I won't even say you might even be able to find camels in Australia, even though I don't think I've ever seen any pictures or movies where they've actually ever been within that southern hemisphere area. Camels can be extremely ruthless. I've heard horror stories of people who decide to mess with camels and learn the hard way. But in this game, camels will be strictly only found in the desert of Rust. You would basically use them as you would use horses, so like forms of pack mules, so they'd be able to carry your stuff. But unlike horses where you can just throw in a saddle or just jump on them, camels would be one of those ones you would still have to tame. So 30 to 50 damage if you actually attack a camel. Good standard 300 health I think would be really good. Like I said, you can only find them in the deserts. They would work like horses. They would have like the bonus of actually being really faster in the desert than they would be the cold or the mountain area or the valley forest area. So I think camels would be a pretty good addition to Rust, just for that strictly mule type of thing like that. Because you do find horses in the deserts, at least in Rust. I've never actually seen a horse in the desert in the real life, so it just doesn't really make sense. So I think if they ever do, like I said, add tameable animals or add new animals to the game, put them strictly just for their environmental areas. They basically did that with the jungle and the panther, They did that with the jungle, but they added the tiger, the panther, and the crocodile and the snake, where you can only find them in the jungle. So why they didn't do that with the resting animals makes no sense to me. but I think the camel would be a pretty cool feature. Let's get to the next sample, shall we? The coyote. Now, people would say, well, you really don't need coyotes in the game because that's what you have wolves for. Yes and no. And if you're not sure what a coyote is, coyotes are basically in the same family, wolves and jackals and stuff like that. Just think more of like a smaller, skinnier version of a wolf. Coyotes can still be pretty ruthless, even in the desert areas, especially if you live in the United States or certain areas where coyotes are mostly going to exist. They do go after small animals, and they tend to be pack hunters too, just like wolves. So they will go after like small cats, small dogs, stuff like that. You will hear horror stories where coyotes will actually jump over people's fences and stuff like that and snatch their small little dogs. They usually tend to be scavengers, but they can also be pack hunters too. But in this case, coyote's health, standard 200, or whatever happens, the wolf's health happens to be, I'd say, put around that area, 20-30 damage. Set up like you with the wolves in Rust, put them as little pack hunters. Except with wolves, on the other hand, where they kill you and they'll eat your corpse, I put it as hunting packs and can steal items in your HUD. So your HUD holds, I believe it's 6 items, 9 items, something like that. I'd have to double check. But I say whatever items you're actually holding in that main HUD inventory, coyotes have a chance to actually steal that item and will actually be on their corpse if you manage to take them out. They kind of did the similar thing with the panthers, tigers, and crocodiles, where if they actually took your character out, they would actually drag your corpse away. So even though you would see the skull symbol where your character died, it's not necessarily that your corpse will actually be there. Panthers will usually drag it a few feet away. Crocodiles will actually drag your corpse into the water, and when your water despawns, it actually turns into a satchel bag, which can be very difficult to find, especially around like night times like that. I've only ever seen coyotes in the desert, so I think that's it where we should keep them in there. Add as like another pack thing, so kind of it might be a little crowded in the desert if you add both wolves and coyotes. But I think they could find some sort of balance between the two in that area. Like, say, for instance, let's keep wolves. How can we put this? Keep wolves like around the afternoon time, but the closer it gets dark, put coyotes, more around the dusk time area. I think would be interesting. Let's get to the next set of animals. Birds. Now, I've mentioned birds before. Birds are somewhat in the game of Rust, however, they're more of an ambient figure. So when you chop a tree down, you may see like a little flock of shadows fly away. That's basically their versions of birds in the game. I think they should actually add birds in the game. Health is 50 damage, or health is 50, 5 to 10, physical damage. So you would say, well, if you're going to add birds in the game, what type of birds would we be looking at? Well, considering that you have your normal standard, crows and ravens and, your blue jays and your cardinals and your little finches, stuff like that, make some form of mixture based on the biome birds happen to be in. Owls would be a really cool feature, especially at nighttime within the forest areas, because owls pretty much cover almost every biome in the game. I don't think I've ever seen an owl in the jungle though. I believe they can live in the rainforest, but I've never actually seen owls in there. I've seen them in the Arctic areas, seen them in the deserts, the mountains, the forest areas, but not really so much of a jungle. Jungle birds, like your toucans and your parrots and stuff like that would be very good. As I put in there, it can be hunted for feathers or let you know where corpses are. Now, the hunted for feather ones, I think you should be able to make like feather headdresses, or even be able to craft certain arrows using feathers from birds and stuff like that. Now, one is to let you know where corpses are. This is where vultures or falcons, usually around the vulture territory, where for instance, is like if your character dies, you hear like the buzzing sounds of insects that are around your corpse and stuff like that. But I think that it should be more a thing where vultures will actually circle a corpse. So if you see like vultures circling around in the sky, that usually means something's died around that area. I think that would be a nice feature in the game, especially if you're like in the desert area. So you're not sure where your body is. You ran to a certain area, or you think your body might have gotten looted, and you're still looking for it. Look up in the sky, you see a bunch of vultures or buzzards circling around. There's a corpse nearby that you can actually try to find. I think that would be a pretty cool feature. I would love to see birds in this game. Not just like little ambient little shadows that just flee from a tree and that's all you get. But let's get to that next animal. Turtles. Now I know this probably seems like a very interesting one. Turtles? What do we need turtles for? Well, when you play Rust, you will only ever notice there's only two. One's more of an ambient creature, the other one's a standard predator in Rust. And that would be fish and sharks. Now, when you dive far enough into the water, you see ambient versions of fish, but you really don't have any form of interaction with fish unless you do fishing or you add fish traps. Sharks, on the other hand, you usually tend to find around shipwrecks and stuff like that. There's usually buoys out in the ocean that let you know there's a shipwreck there. I believe some of the fishing villages have quests where it requires you to go down to a shipwreck to unlock crates to unlock certain weapons, and sometimes there may be sharks down there. I would love to see more oceanic creatures. Turtles would be one of them. I believe, I want to say maybe 5-6-ish years ago, somewhere around there, maybe even a little longer than that, Minecraft added turtles to the game, and you could actually use turtle scoots to make turtle armor. I think that should be something that should be in Rust, because you do have hide armor, you have metal armor, and you have bone armor, but you don't really have a mixture of something like leather or any form of animal type of armor, except maybe for like wolf skull armor. You may hear a car go by, so I do apologize. There is wolf skull armor. If you save wolf skulls, you can turn them to wolf headdresses and stuff like that. That's basically as far as animal clothing actually goes. I think turtle shells could be used as some form of chest piece armor. Would be really cool. Can be hunted for food. Turtle shells. I put turtle shells in there twice. Turtles can be used as body armor. Found on beaches or islands, so the coastal area that you would normally see turtles, or the standard islands that tend to be off from the mainland area. I think it would be the only place to really find turtles. And now I put health around 200, damage would be 5 to 10. You really don't see a turtle really attacking a person. Even like tortoises and stuff like that, it can be really stubborn. You get into the areas of more something like snapping turtles on the hand, where you can actually take your finger off if you're not careful. That's more around the dangerous area. I can see turtles also be putting in swamps. If you do add something like snapping turtles, there are some miniature swamps in the actual game, but I don't really consider them to be an actual biome itself because they're just not big enough. Yeah, and I wouldn't really put turtles as a tameable animal in the game. And I don't really see any actual use for them besides actually food or forms of body armor. But let's get to that next animal. Whales. Now, this is something I was talking to my buddy about having oceanic animals that should be in the game. Whales and dolphins, I think, should be actually put into Rust. Now, there was one thing I was originally going to put in here, and I had to re-edit it and forgot to put in here. So let's get to the standard stuff. Whales, health of 1,000 health. And I know that seems a little, 1,000 health for an animal in the game, that's a little too much. But considering if you look at the most health enemy in the game, which is Bradley, which has 2,000 health, plus each of his standard little sciences to come out between 250 to maybe 500 health per one of those guys. Bradley has the most health of any enemy in the entire game. And that's just more of an NPC, but I think whales should have a good standard 1,000 health. If you're only going to find them in the ocean, you're not really going to find a whale in a lake or on the land, something like that. This can be hunted for food. Whale bones can make heavy bone armor. Now, there is heavy armor in the game. I don't remember what it's called. It's like heavy sheet metal armor or something like that, but it's like standard, full-on black heavy armor where you cannot move around. I tried it one time. I was curious. I was like, because everyone was talking about, how effective heavy armor is in the game, especially if you're getting raided. You slap some of that on, you slap a machine LMG or an AK on, and you're almost damn near invincible to kill. So I was like, you know what? I'm kind of curious. At the time, I was living near abandoned military base. I slapped that armor, tried to take abandoned military base, and got my ass kicked. That armor, not only is it slow, I find it to be incredibly a pile of crap. To put it bluntly, I did not like the heavy armor. I don't know if it's only good against PvP and not so much PvE, but I did not find it helpful whatsoever. Like I said, once again, when it comes to animal armor, stuff like that, heavy bone armor, I think it should be a natural thing, because you do have bone armor in the game. You only have the headdress and a chest piece. That's it. You don't get anything else. I think there should be that version of the heavy armor that you normally get, but made out of whale bones. Can only be found in the deep ocean. So this would be areas that you would only find like sharks and stuff like that. You won't really find them too close to the shoreline. Any really version of whale would work. Usually humpback whales tend to be the most popular ones. Damage 50 to 100. So if the whale happens to leap out of the water and hits you, it's going to be almost an instant death. Now, one of the things that I was actually going to put in here that I forgot to was they should have bonus damage to boats. So if a whale happens to land on your boat or crashes into your boat, it should actually do bonus damage to your boat. That's just my personal opinion, because if you ever see whales landing on a guy in a canoe, he's most likely not going to survive. But let's get to that last animal. Do you guys know what it is? You'd be kind of surprised. And I bet you didn't guess it. Another oceanic animal. Seals. This was another thing I was talking about. Seals should be something that should be added into the game. Now, you can find seals usually in Arctic areas, tropical areas, islands, beaches, and stuff like that. Since you do have technically, like, walruses are a form of the family of seal. You do have things like leopard seals, which are extremely dangerous and are one of the biggest predators to penguins besides orcas. And there have been horror stories where people have gone ice fishing and have actually been taken out by leopard seals. But in this case, we're going to basically just use your standard sea lions or seals. Health about 250, seals about 30 to 50 damage. Seals can weigh quite a bit. So you're talking about easily maybe 200 pounds for a seal. And seals have a pretty good bite force, maybe stronger than a dog, but they have no problem messing you up. But as I put it in there, can be for food. Seal flippers can be made to make better swimming flippers. Now, once again, flippers, oxygen tanks, scuba gear goggles, and scuba gear armor is a thing in this game. However, once again, it is still pretty rare to find, even on the brown crates on the sides of roads, or if you don't have the scrap to buy them. At Fishing Village, now this is another thing where people going like, well, I could just go to Fishing Village and I could just buy a bunch of scuba gear. You could, but let's say, for instance, your perfect spot on the map happens to be, I don't know, the north side of the map, and the only fishing village happens to be on the south side of the map. And let's say that south side of the map is a desert area, that's your only fishing village, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to go live up in the Arctic area on the north side, but there's no fishing village, and you're living in the Arctic area is a area that tends to have a lot of big clans. And let's say, you want to go scuba diving, or you want to take on one of the underwater labs, but you really don't want to have to be bothered going on the roads searching for scuba gear, and you might get taken out. This is where seals would come into play. Be able to hunt seals down, and make, seal flippers. Make them actually slightly better than, standard, flippers you would get from scuba gear. I only put it as can be found on beaches or islands. I should also add that to Arctic areas too. Like I said, another area right there, you can actually find seals. And, once again, get animal hide, get food from them, and stuff like that. But these are some of the animals that, in my opinion, I think should be added to Rust. I would like to see in the near future, because we need a more variety of animals. I mean, because the jungle biome was added 2 years ago, and we haven't gotten a new animal since. Horses, wolves, bears, polar bears, boars, and deer, and sharks. From what I'm aware of, Rust came out in 2012, and they have not changed their animals ever since the jungle update. So that says a lack of imagination from Facepunch, and you can't tell me that they're saving these things for later, or they really haven't been really thought about, or you got to add the mechanics for these animals, and you got to figure out where you're gonna put. That's the biggest crock of shit. Facepunch has been out, like I said, from my guessing, in 2012. You've had 14 years to add different varieties, and we're just now getting stuff that should have been in this game a long time ago. And different varieties of animals, I think this should be in Rust. Go check out my Team Mobile animal videos and let me know what you think about that one. If you think those animals would make the game better or break them. And let me know about this video too. Do you think these animals would fit well in Rust, or do you think that there should be more variety, or are you happy with the animals that are actually in Rust now, and they should just more focus on PvP than actual ambient environmental areas of like animals or new biomes, because those are ones that I've mentioned before, and I will eventually be adding new items in the game. I think that would fit pretty well into Rust too. But leave those comments below, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, and stay safe, healthy, and sanitized. And before we go, I'm gonna give a big shout out to one of my gaming buddies, Out to Smoke. He's been watching my videos. Shout out to you, buddy. And you guys will see this video probably sometime this upcoming week, since I'm recording this on Saturday and it is my birthday. So check within the videos of next week, and it should be out around then. But this is Let's Talk About Rust. Animals that should be added to the Rust itself. I'll see you guys then.